Hey there, viewers. There are places built on silence, fenced off, buried deep, never meant to be seen. Area 51 is one of them, and when you walk in with someone like Donald Trump, the doors they open aren't just classified, they're horrifying. What I witnessed inside still keeps me up at night. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Flight That Wasn't Logged. I've been quiet about this for a long time. Not because I signed some official form, though I did more than once, but because I never knew how to talk about it without sounding insane. And if you've spent as much time around men like Trump as I have, you learn quick what insanity really looks like. Most of the time, it wears a suit and smiles for the cameras. But this wasn't that. This was something else, something colder, older. I'm not the poetic type, but I'll tell you the truth as best I can, simple as it happened. You can do with it what you want. It started in Nevada. I was part of the president's private security detail, technically Secret Service, but by that point we were a blended team. Agency guys, military handlers, even some contractors whose credentials were too vague to verify. I'd worked 3 presidents by then. Trump wasn't the first egomaniac I'd shadowed, but he was the most unpredictable. One minute he's ranting about windmills, the next he's off scrim by miles, dragging us through back doors and private tours just because someone whispered something he found interesting. That's how this started. Someone whispered. We'd landed in Reno for what was supposed to be a simple campaign event. Speech at a casino, grip and grin with local law enforcement, maybe a rally. Pretty boilerplate. But when we touched down, something was already off. The Air Force liaison at the tarmac wasn't one of the usual faces. No smile, no briefing, just a curt nod and a silent escort into a separate hangar. No press around, none of the usual ground crew waiting with cameras or flags, just dust, heat, and the hum of engines idling somewhere deeper in the hangar. Inside, Trump was pulled aside by a man I'd never seen before. Tall, lean, old military type. Uniform but no nameplate, no rank insignia, just bars. He whispered something into Trump's ear. I was close enough to hear one word: opportunity. Trump looked at him real serious, then turned to us and said, "Change of plans." Nobody blinked. That's how it was with him. We adjusted. We moved. But even then, I had a feeling. It started behind my eyes, like a pressure drop in a sealed room, like the air was warning me. We boarded a different aircraft, not Air Force One. Smaller, stripped down, blacked out windows. I'd never been on this model before, and I've ridden just about everything that flies. There were no tail numbers, no call signs, just a faint insignia on the inner hatch, a triangle bordered in red. The flight itself wasn't long, maybe 45 minutes, but something was wrong with the way it moved. It didn't bank like a normal plane. It felt more like we were being drawn somewhere, rather than flying to it. The crew didn't speak. Not once, just nodded when asked questions, handed out earpieces that crackled with soft static even when silent. Trump sat in the back, hands steepled under his chin, which wasn't like him. Normally he'd be talking, cracking jokes, asking questions, but this time he was dead quiet, just staring out the black glass like he could see through it. As we approached descent, the cabin lights flickered, subtle, almost like a mistake, but enough for a few of us to glance around. Then it happened, a hum, low at first, like the distant rumble of a transformer station, but rising slow, vibrating through the floor, into the seat backs, and up into our jaws. My teeth buzzed. My vision went slightly fuzzy, like the air itself was a filter. It stopped as suddenly as it started. The earpiece came to life. A clipped voice. Descent initiated. Maintain silence until tarmac. We landed on what looked like nothing. Just flat desert ringed by rocky ridges, nothing visible for miles. No lights, no buildings, just dirt and heat. But as we rolled forward, something shimmered into view. A building, squat and sharp-edged, materializing like it had been cloaked. It didn't rise above the earth much, just a sliver of metal embedded into the flatness, with angular surfaces that reflected nothing. It didn't gleam in the sun, it seemed to absorb it. We stopped. The ramp lowered. Trump stood before we were cleared and walked straight out. I followed. The air was dry, but heavy. Not the kind of weight you feel from heat. This was something else, like being underwater without the wetness. The wind didn't blow. The desert felt. Paused. The man from earlier, the one with no nameplate, was waiting again, alongside two others in darker uniforms. They didn't salute, didn't speak, just opened a gate that led into the ground. Trump didn't hesitate. He walked right through. We descended maybe 5-6 levels down. No elevators, just steel stairs and small airlocks every few flights. The deeper we went, the colder it got. The walls changed from brushed metal to a kind of matte black stone. No seams, no bolts. The architecture stopped looking American. I noticed the soldiers down here wouldn't make eye contact. One of them, a kid, couldn't have been more than 20, was visibly shaking. I reached for my sidearm once, just to feel it was still there. I wasn't scared, yet, not exactly, but I knew we'd crossed a threshold into something we weren't supposed to see. At the bottom, the tunnel opened into a wide platform. No signage, no flags, just a vast black door with no handles. The uniformed man finally turned to us, looked Trump dead in the eyes and said, "This is what no one else sees. Presidents are shown pieces. You'll see the whole thing." Trump raised his eyebrows like he didn't quite believe him, but he nodded. No smirk, just readiness. The man looked at the rest of us, paused on me. His eyes were tired, in a way I can't explain, like he hadn't slept in years, but it wasn't sleep he needed. He said one thing, quiet, low, like it wasn't meant for the whole group. "You'll see something you won't understand. You're not here to understand it." Then the door opened. I don't remember stepping forward. I just remember the smell, sterile, electric, like ozone after a lightning strike. And the sound, that hum again, only this time it was inside my chest. We entered the facility, and nothing I knew about Earth made sense anymore. Chapter 2. The Vault Beneath the Runway. The moment that door opened, it felt like the air changed texture. Not just cooler, not just sterile, thicker somehow. Like walking into a place where the air had been held in place for so long it didn't know how to move anymore. There was a hiss of pressure releasing as we passed through, and then we were inside. Or under. I'm not sure there's a word for where we were. The place wasn't designed to be mapped, not in a way humans are used to. It was like someone had built a corridor based on a math problem rather than architecture. Angles that looked normal until you tried to follow them. Spaces that felt like they were closing in, but didn't actually shrink. Every few feet, a red light blinked behind a seamless panel. I couldn't tell if it was scanning us or just pretending to. The general, the one with no name, walked ahead without pause. Trump stayed close behind him, hands clasped behind his back like he was touring a golf resort. He still hadn't said much, just muttered something earlier about the humidity, a dumb thing to focus on considering where we were, but typical of him. I stayed a few steps behind, hand resting near my belt, not touching my sidearm, but ready if I had to. I didn't know why I felt that way. There weren't threats here, not in the usual sense. No gunmen or bombs or ambushes. Just the kind of wrong that lives in geometry and silence. The first thing I noticed as we walked deeper was the glass. Thick, wall-sized panels lining the hall. Windows into rooms full of activity that didn't seem designed for us to understand. Behind one, I saw a row of 20 identical men sitting upright in chairs, motionless, wearing white suits with black visors. They didn't move as we passed. In another, machines spun slowly around a single object that hovered in place, a sphere covered in what looked like moving scales, like a snake wrapped around itself but still breathing. Screens filled with symbols pulsed in slow rhythm. Charts, celestial trajectories, seismic graphs, overlaid with something that looked like fractals. Every surface was lit but not bright, just enough to make everything visible and nothing clear. A man in a dark lab coat joined us halfway through the hall, stepping out from a side corridor. He nodded at the general, but didn't introduce himself. His badge read simply, Santos. He walked with us in silence for a minute before finally speaking. "You're entering the vault level," he said. His voice was even, practiced. "Most of what's stored here predates your administration. Some of it predates your species." Trump finally spoke, his voice casual, like he was playing along. "This what NASA does when the cameras are off? Build Bond villain lairs?" Santos didn't answer. He turned right at an intersection and led us to a larger blast door. No handles, no security pad, just a recessed scanner, eye level. He leaned in and a soft tone pulsed once. The door slid open without a sound. What came next didn't make sense, even in hindsight. The room was cold. That was the first thing. I felt it in my teeth, behind my eyes, not freezing, colder than that. The kind of cold that suggests absence, like even heat had been extracted. It wasn't a large room, maybe 20 feet across, but it didn't feel like a room. The walls sloped up into a dome, or at least something that gave the impression of a dome. But there were no lines, no seams, no structure. It just was. In the center hovered the cube. I say hovered because it didn't rest on anything. No cables, no suspension rig. It didn't even seem to cast a shadow, despite the faint white light glowing from thin strips embedded in the floor. It was black, completely black, but not in a way you could point at and say dark. This wasn't paint or obsidian or a surface. It was something else. It didn't reflect. It didn't absorb. It denied. The air around it seemed warped, like heat shimmer but in reverse, like it wasn't supposed to be here, but we'd built a room to keep it from leaving. Santos approached it slowly, gesturing us to follow. "This is Sector S," he said. "It's our containment bay for what we classify as non-reactive intelligence." Trump cocked an eyebrow. "Non-reactive? Looks like a floating paperweight." "It doesn't react to probes, contact, or signals," Santos replied. "Not in ways we can measure, but it changes people." "Changes them how?" I asked, my voice sounding smaller than I meant it to. Santos didn't look at me. He pointed to the floor around the cube. I hadn't noticed until then, but there were faint markings, lines scored into the metal surface in concentric circles. Each was slightly warped, uneven, like they'd been made by something vibrating. "It hums at a frequency we can't hear," he said, "but it's felt. After 10 minutes in proximity, most subjects report headaches, vertigo, irritability. After 30, they begin to dream while awake." "And after an hour?" I asked. "They might want to leave." Trump stepped forward, closer than I would have let anyone else go. Santos didn't stop him. Neither did the general. The president stood just a few feet from the cube. His reflection didn't show in it. None of ours did. He reached out, slow, deliberate, and placed his palm near it, not on it, just inches away. That's when the pressure started. It wasn't noise, not really. More like every thought in my head slowed down, like I was watching myself watch him. My knees went loose. I grabbed the rail beside me, knuckles whitening. One of the other agents groaned behind me and leaned into the wall. Trump didn't flinch. The air between his hand and the cube seemed to ripple. A faint vibration passed through the floor, into my legs, up my spine. I felt something warm trickle from my nose and reached up without thinking. Blood. A thin stream. Then it pulsed. I don't mean light or movement. I mean something in the cube moved inside itself, like a fold in space that had been dormant, just shifted. I didn't see it, I felt it. Everyone did. Trump's hand dropped. He took a step back, blinking slowly like he'd just woken from a nap. No one said anything for a few seconds. "What is it?" he asked, voice quieter than I'd ever heard from him. Santos exhaled through his nose. "Storage, prison, library. We don't know. Every theory collapses under testing." Trump sat down on a low bench near the wall, suddenly looking pale. He didn't speak again for the rest of the visit. We remained in that room for 20 more minutes. No one touched the cube again. The hum faded but never stopped entirely. Even as we left, it followed us, sitting behind the world like a second heartbeat. The corridor back to the stairs felt longer, heavier. Back in the upper levels, Trump didn't crack jokes anymore. He didn't talk at all. He just walked, slower than before, like gravity had changed and no one told him. That night, he didn't eat dinner. That was the first time I saw him really afraid. And I couldn't blame him, because whatever that thing was, it saw him too. Chapter 3, The Silence Room. I woke up without remembering falling asleep, which was the first red flag. The second was the absence of sound. No humming fluorescent lights, no distant mechanical hiss, no voices, just stillness, absolute and artificial. I opened my eyes to a dull gray ceiling, featureless, smooth, the kind of ceiling you only ever see in facilities designed to make you forget where you are. There were no corners in the room. Everything rounded into itself. Even the bed I was lying on had no legs, just a molded slab jutting out of the wall like someone had tried to make a prison cell feel like a hotel. I sat up slowly. My head felt thick, not sore exactly, just suspended, like my thoughts were lagging half a second behind my actions. I rubbed my face. My stubble had grown in more than it should have, which meant I'd been out longer than a nap. My watch was gone, so was my earpiece, my sidearm too. A tray of food sat in the corner, untouched, like someone had expected me to wake sooner. The door had no handle, just a palm-sized pad flush with the wall. I stood in front of it until it hissed and slid open. The hallway beyond was different from the rest of the base. Warmer lighting, faint green strips along the floor, no labels, no security posted, no cameras that I could see. I walked, slowly at first, then faster, glancing down each intersecting hall, all identical, curving slightly, creating the illusion of infinite continuity. I started to sweat. Eventually, I saw a sign, a single frosted glass panel embedded in the wall, Neurological Observation, Sectors AD. I pressed forward, past another pressure-sealed door that opened without a sound. What I walked into made the bottom drop out of my stomach. It was a gallery, a hallway with glass walls on both sides, each sectioned off like exhibits in a museum. Behind the glass were people, dozens of them, all strapped into recliners that looked like dental chairs crossed with surgical rigs. Their heads were encased in something soft, almost phone-like, with tubes and fiber optic lines feeding into helmets or directly into scalp implants I couldn't identify. Every subject was motionless, eyes closed, some twitching faintly like dogs in the middle of REM sleep. Each room had a monitor, not displaying vitals but visuals. Real-time projections of their brain activity, at least that's what I thought at first. But the images weren't medical. They were symbols. Moving symbols, spinning, fracturing, recombining. Some looked like geometric snowflakes dissolving into tendrils, others like cities built from circuits pulsing and folding into themselves, over and over. Patterns emerged, then collapsed into new ones. Behind every sequence was a backdrop, a black sky, empty at first, but sometimes something moved through it. I stood watching one screen for maybe a minute. That's all it took before I realized the patterns were beginning to sync with my own breathing. Inhale, spiral expands. Exhale, spiral fractures. It wasn't a visual feed. It was reactive. It wanted you to watch. It wanted you to match it. You shouldn't stare too long. I jumped, instinctively reaching for my hip before remembering I had no weapon. A man stood beside me now, silent in his approach, lab coat, thin, hollow-cheeked. He didn't offer a name, just pointed toward the furthest section. "These are the ones who heard it," he said. I followed his hand. At the end of the hall were 3 larger rooms, sealed behind heavier doors. Inside were more recliners, but these subjects looked worse. Thinner, twitchier, some had IV drips, one had restraints at the wrists and ankles. Their screens weren't just patterns, they were environments. Endless corridors, archways, deserts under black skies. Every image shared one thing: motion in the distance, something vast, slowly approaching, never getting closer. "What is this place?" I asked. He looked at me with tired eyes. "Containment, observation, call it what you want. Everyone here spent time in Sector S." "The cube." He nodded. "Proximity does something to the brain. We think it's a kind of signal, but not in the traditional sense. More like radiation with intent. That's not a sentence that makes any damn sense. Neither does what's in that room." I looked again at the subjects. They're dreaming? They're perceiving. Dreaming suggests a subconscious state. These aren't dreams. These are translations. Partial, fragment, like someone trying to speak across a language barrier that isn't based on language at all. "Why not pull them out?" He gave a short, bitter laugh. "Some of them begged to stay. Others went into seizures the moment we tried. One man screamed for 9 hours after we took his headset off. Said the silence was worse." I felt cold creep down my spine. "What are they seeing?" He looked back toward the screens. A shape, or the absence of one. A location, possibly a memory, but not ours. I didn't realize how tightly I was clenching my fists until my knuckles cracked. "Where's the president?" The man didn't answer right away. "Where is he?" I repeated, louder. "Not in his quarters." I took off. I don't know how I found my way back, maybe muscle memory, maybe luck, but I navigated the curving halls back toward the main facility. Every room I passed was quiet. Every corner looked the same. Eventually I hit a familiar junction, a hallway I remembered from the cube level. The door to Sector S was open. I stepped through slowly. He was there, standing alone in the chamber, back to me, hands clasped behind his back like before. The cube hovered silently in front of him. The hum had returned, faint under the skin, just loud enough to feel. I didn't speak at first, I just watched him. He didn't move for a long time. Finally, I stepped closer. "Sir?" He didn't turn around, but I saw his head tilt, slightly. "It doesn't speak in words," he said, voice low. I didn't respond. "It just wants to be seen." He finally turned to face me. His eyes looked strange, unfocused, like he was seeing through me. He looked more tired than I'd ever seen him. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind you get when you've realized too much of the wrong thing. "I stood here for hours," he said. "I watched it. I waited for it to do something. Then I realized it already had." "Mr. President, we need to go. This place. It's older than language," he interrupted. "Older than planets. They didn't build it for us. We were never supposed to find it." His lips moved slowly, like the words were coming from somewhere else. Not possession, not exactly, more like translation, like he was remembering a message he hadn't received yet. I saw the black sky. I saw the pattern behind the stars. You ever wonder why everything rotates, why galaxies spiral? It's not gravity, it's memory. I stepped forward. "Sir, please, let's leave this room." He blinked slowly, like it took effort. "I can't hear the silence anymore," he whispered. "That's how I know it sees me now." I didn't wait for permission. I stepped between him and the cube, gently took his arm and guided him out. He didn't resist, just walked. Heavy steps. The hum faded behind us, but not from my body. It lingered there, low and constant. Back in the hall, I looked at him. Really looked. The confidence was still there, but dimmed, like a light left on too long. His mouth opened, then closed. No words, just something between regret and awe. We didn't talk again that night, and in the silence that followed, I began to feel the dreams. Chapter 4. The Archive. No president is supposed to see. I don't know how long I slept after we left the cube chamber, or if I slept at all. Time had already started to lose its shape by that point. Inside that place, whatever you want to call it, watches didn't work right. Walls didn't echo. Dreams didn't feel like dreams. One moment I was lying flat on the bunk, trying to quiet the hum I now felt even when it wasn't there, and the next I was being escorted down another corridor. This one was deeper, colder, heavier in the chest, like we were diving with every step. The generals, still no name, still no rank, walked ahead of us, flanked by 2 silent guards and the same technician from before. Trump walked in the center, slower than before, eyes scanning the walls but not focusing on anything. I stayed close behind. Not because I was told to, but because I couldn't shake the feeling that if I let him out of my sight, I'd lose more than just a man. I'd lose the thread completely, myself with it. We stopped at a large circular door embedded into the farthest end of the sub-level. This wasn't like the others. No clean seams, no light panels, just matte black stone with a brass mechanism in the center, shaped like a wheel but carved in overlapping runes. I'd never seen a door like it. Hell, I'd never seen a door that looked like it had to decide whether to open or not. "This is Archive 9, the technician said, voice almost reverent. It's sealed under executive restriction, only accessed twice before. "Who accessed it?" Trump asked. The general paused, then replied, "Truman and Reagan," briefly. I glanced sideways at him, then back at the door. It didn't feel like we were about to walk into a room. It felt like we were entering memory itself. The technician placed his hand on the wheel and whispered something I didn't catch. The mechanism spun slowly, then faster, until it clicked, just once. And the door split open soundlessly. Inside was something between a vault and a museum, but none of the lights were on. Small orbs in the ceiling glowed dimly as we entered, responding to our presence. No fluorescence, no flickering bulbs, just a soft illumination that made everything look like it was underwater. Shelves lined the walls, titanium rods holding binders, reels of magnetic tape, thick leather-bound journals tagged with mission numbers. In the center of the room sat 3 glass displays. On the left, a chunk of torn metal, blackened at the edges, with a jagged ridge that shimmered faintly when you looked too closely. In the center, a sealed box labeled in Cyrillic, with a NASA sticker crookedly slapped over the top. On the right, a narrow table with a thick binder open to a transcript marked Apollo 11, Supplemental Comms, Buzz, Crater, 17, Not for Distribution. I stepped forward instinctively. The words were typewritten, redacted in places with thick black bars, but enough remained. "Buzz, Neil, do you see that?" Armstrong, Yeah, I see it. Buzz, looks dug in, like a pit but shaped. Control, Tranquility Base, repeat last transmission. Buzz, negative, nothing to report, just shadows. Then silence. Below it a handwritten note, 17 seconds redacted from master recording, crew instructed not to disclose. Trump leaned over the table and stared at the page. "Why'd this?" he asked. "We went to the moon. We paid to go to the moon. Why not show the good stuff?" The technician didn't smile, didn't blink. "Because we don't control it, and we don't understand it. We only survive it." I turned to the next display, the metal fragment. It was shaped like a triangle but uneven, with etched lines that reminded me of crop circles but sharper, mechanical, not ornamental. A placard beneath it read, "Recovered, Roswell, 1947, reclassified 1971. The technician reached forward and touched the edge of the glass. The metal inside shimmered again, brighter now, and then it began to hum. Not a noise, not really, more like a vibration felt through the soles of your feet and up into your teeth. The same frequency, the same resonance as the cube, but faster, thinner. The technician nodded. When exposed to heat, it emits patterns, sound frequencies, that match structural ratios found in Sumerian ziggurats and in the tomb architecture of the Old Kingdom pyramids, structures built thousands of years apart, continents away, all aligned to the same frequency. Trump's expression changed. His usual half-smirk, the one he wore like armor, softened into something else. He stared at the shard like it was the first thing in the room worth taking seriously. "So they've been here before," he said. "No," the technician replied. "They never left." We moved to the final table, where an array of photos had been laid out in sequence, some black and white, some in colors so faded they looked grayscale. A series of images from the 1950s, most military in nature. Rocket tests, site inspections, flight crews in front of strange aircraft with swept wings and strange angular canopies that looked like they'd been bolted onto something not built by us. But one photo stopped me cold. It showed a group of 10 men in uniform, Air Force judging by the lapels, though none bore recognizable name tags. They stood in a semicircle around a large octagonal platform with a cube hovering silently at the center. The same cube, not a replica, not something similar. The same object I had stood in front of just a day earlier. The men stared at the camera, some smiling, some not. But it was one in the center that made my mouth go dry. He looked like Trump. Not sort of, not vaguely, not coincidentally, exactly. The same jawline, the same hair, different style, but unmistakable. Same hands, same posture. I picked up the photo with shaking fingers. "When was this taken?" I asked. The technician looked down. 1952. I looked again. The uniform was correct for the era. The face younger, but him. Absolutely him. "What the hell is this?" No one answered. I looked at the general. He looked away. Trump didn't move. He stared at the photo for a long time, then at the cube in the image, then at the one from yesterday, hovering in his memory. "Have you run DNA?" I asked. The technician didn't blink. "We don't have a sample. The man disappeared 2 weeks after the photo was taken. Files list him as an intelligence officer, but the name was purged. We've never found another record of him anywhere." I looked at Trump. "Sir?" He was quiet. Too quiet. Then, softly, "I used to have dreams as a kid of a black room with light that didn't come from anywhere. Thought it was just nightmares." I didn't reply. Neither did anyone else. We left the archive slowly. I carried the photo in my hand for a long time before realizing I wasn't supposed to. I set it down just before we exited. Back in the corridor, the lights felt too bright, the air too thin, like we'd stepped out of history and into something waiting for it to catch up. That night, I couldn't sleep, because deep in my gut, I knew that photo hadn't just been a look-alike. I knew that somehow, impossibly, it was him. And whatever that meant, it hadn't finished meaning it yet. Chapter 5. Something Responds. It started with the lights. Not all at once, not the kind of blackout you see in movies where everything goes dark and people scream and sparks fly from control panels. No, this was slower, smarter, like the facility itself was being peeled back layer by layer. First, the overheads dimmed, not flickered, just softened, as if the bulbs were bleeding out instead of burning out. Then the panels on the walls went gray, status lights blinking out in perfect synchronicity. Emergency generators didn't kick in, not right away. No alarms, just silence, and cold. I was sitting in the central observation hall when it happened, drinking something that was supposed to be coffee but tasted like recycled air and metal. Trump was in the conference bay 2 levels down with the technician, Santos, I think, and a pair of scientists from the psychological review team. I hadn't heard much from him since we left the archive. He'd been quiet, which wasn't like him, but I'd stopped trying to find comfort in anything familiar. There wasn't much left that felt like the world I knew. The coffee cup was halfway to my lips when the Hume returned. Not the faint one I'd gotten used to, the background resonance you feel in your teeth but can't trace. This was different, sharper, like a pressure building from inside the bones. I stood up just as the monitors on the wall blinked and filled with static, then symbols. Not text, not images, just cascading loops of what looked like geometry unspooling itself, fractals folding inward, spinning cubes within cubes, patterns too perfect to be random and too alien to mean anything. They flashed faster, overlaid with pulsing coordinates that didn't match any terrestrial map. No latitudes or longitudes, no hemispheres. Just raw, cold math that made my skin prickle. Then came the sound, or the absence of it. Somewhere deep in the facility, a pressure door slammed shut. The sound didn't echo, it just landed like a punch and disappeared. I reached for my earpiece before remembering I hadn't had one since the silence room. My comms were still disabled, my sidearm was still gone. That sense of helplessness came roaring back like a forgotten fever. I moved to the hallway, heart hammering in my chest. That's when I heard the scream. It wasn't close. It came from somewhere above, where the security staff usually rotated. Sector C or D, maybe. A single voice, high-pitched and frantic. Male, repeating the same phrase over and over again, barely forming words through raw panic. The mirrored sky. Don't look at it, don't look up. I ran. The corridors were dark now, lit only by soft emergency floor lights, casting long, warped shadows. 2 guards came running from the opposite direction. One was bleeding from his nose. The other held the side of his head like something was clawing at the inside of it. "What's happening?" I asked. They didn't answer, just bolted past me like I wasn't there. The elevator was down, of course. I took the stairs 2 levels down toward the cube chamber. The closer I got, the stronger the hum became. My vision blurred at the edges. My pulse synced to something I couldn't name. And then, as I reached the lower landing, I saw the door to Sector S wide open, light flooding out in strange, flickering rhythms. Trump stood in the center of the chamber, alone. No guards, no techs, no suits. Just him and the cube. But it wasn't hovering anymore. It was turning. Slowly, impossibly, it had begun to rotate. Not along an axis, not in any direction I could define. Just movement, absolute and silent. It didn't reflect light, but as it moved, the shadows in the room shifted like they were being redrawn. The walls curved inward. The hum deepened. Trump didn't look at me as I stepped into the room. He was talking, quietly. At first I thought it was nonsense, repetition of syllables strung together in strange sequences. Then I realized it was a language, just not one I understood. I moved closer, cautiously. The moment I crossed the threshold of the chamber, my ears popped. Like we were underwater now, or like the space inside the room didn't agree with the space outside it. Trump raised one hand slowly and began drawing symbols in the air. not with anything, just his finger, looping through invisible ink. But as he moved, the lines began to glow, briefly, like heat signatures, like memory. He repeated one shape over and over, a triangle inside a circle, bisected by a jagged line. I recognized it. I had seen it in the archive, on the metal fragment recovered from Roswell. I had seen it on the helmet of one of the unconscious patients in neurological observation. And now, here it was again, called forth without instruction, from a man who hadn't been shown it. He spoke again, this time in English. "It remembers me." His eyes didn't blink. His voice was soft but certain. "It's not looking for answers, it's looking for mirrors. It's looking for the pieces it left behind." He turned to face me, eyes wide but not panicked, focused, aware but not here. I knew this shape before I was born. I didn't know what to say. I should have called for help, should have dragged him out, but I didn't. I couldn't, because something in me knew it too. The cube stopped turning. The hum ceased instantly. The silence that followed wasn't absence. It was intent, like a question waiting to be answered. Trump stepped back, gently, his shoulders lowered. He breathed in, deep and slow, then whispered something so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "Zirolak." I repeated it to myself. The word had no meaning, but the moment I said it out loud, the lights in the room blinked once. I looked at Trump. "What is that?" He smiled, just a little. "I don't know." I heard footsteps behind me. Santos and two others, pale and shaken, entered the chamber cautiously. One of the guards raised a syringe, something fast-acting, no doubt. I stepped in front of him. "Don't," I said. "You don't know what it's doing to him," Santos warned. "Yes, I do," I replied. "It's waking something up." One of the other techs stared at the cube, now motionless once more. "It's never moved before," she said, voice trembling. "It's never responded before." Trump turned away from us and walked to the far side of the chamber, slowly tracing his hand along the perimeter where the cube's shadow met the wall. "It wasn't made for us," he said. "It's been waiting for the one who is already part of it." Santos looked at me. "It's trying to align. Whatever's inside that cube, it recognizes him." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because I knew it was true. Later, back in my quarters, I wrote the word down. Zirolak. No one else had mentioned it. No one else had taught it to him. And yet, when I searched the internal archive system, just once, on a hunch, I found a fragment in a redacted field note from 1958, buried in a file tagged Magnetic Memory Interference, Groom Lake Test 3. The note read, "Subject B entered a trance-like state after exposure, repeated a phoneme sequence resembling Zirolak. All cognitive faculties returned after removal. Subject retained no memory." I stared at the page for a long time. Then I closed the terminal. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of the hum, but because I was starting to hear something else. Something beneath it. Something whispering the shape of the sky and telling me not to look up. Chapter 6. The return to the surface. We left in silence. No alarms, no briefings, no official debrief, just a quiet order to evacuate the facility and return to the surface. It came from nowhere. No signature, no rank, no room full of nervous intelligence officers laying out containment procedures. Just a line passed from mouth to ear down the long concrete corridors, like a spell being whispered through an ancient church. "It's over. We're done here." The base didn't light back up. Power remained minimal, with only the emergency runners glowing along the baseboards. The cube chamber was locked, sealed by a mechanism that none of us saw engage. When I passed it for the last time, the door was cold to the touch, colder than any metal had a right to be, like the temperature behind it wasn't measured in degrees, but in distance from human understanding. We were escorted topside under armed watch, not normal base security. These were new men in suits too clean with faces too blank, not military, not contractors, not anything I recognized. They didn't speak, didn't look us in the eye. They didn't have to. Their job wasn't to guard us. It was to ensure that whatever we carried inside us never made it beyond the gates without permission. Trump didn't speak on the elevator up, not once. He stood still, arms folded in front of him, eyes locked forward. I stood next to him, trying to make sense of his silence. This wasn't the defiant quiet of a man who knew something no one else did. This was a man who'd been used like a wire, a conduit. Something had passed through him in that chamber, and now the power was off, but the current was still humming in the walls. The tarmac was hot underfoot when we stepped out. The jet was ready, already fueled, ramp lowered. No salutes, no send-off, just motion. Get on, get out, forget what you saw. We boarded and lifted off without a word. The cabin was dim, curtains drawn. No press, no aides. Just him, me, and the same silence that had followed us all the way from Sector S. I sat across from him, watching him stare at nothing. He hadn't blinked much since we got back. I wanted to say something, anything. "Do you remember what you said down there?" I asked. He didn't move. I mean, the words, Cyrillac, the symbols, the voice. Do you remember saying any of that? He turned to me slowly. His expression was blank, not vacant, just borrowed. Like someone else had left fingerprints on his face. "I didn't say it," he answered. "It said it through me." That was all. We didn't speak again until the wheels touched down. The return to the White House was deliberately uneventful. The usual motorcade, the same Secret Service faces, but the air was wrong. No press hovering by the fence, no interns on their phones. Everyone moved slower, more deliberately, like they'd been warned not to ask questions, like they knew someone or something had come back with us, and they wanted no part in it. Trump disappeared into the residence. I was left standing by the West Wing entrance, wondering what came next. I didn't get long to wonder. Within hours, the cover-up began. A short internal memo was circulated. The Groom Lake site was officially decommissioned for internal security restructuring. All personnel reassigned to remote outposts. Technicians rotated to other black programs, though a handful never arrived at their new posts. One of them, Santos, the lead tech on the cube, went completely missing. No forwarding file, no trace. I checked his credential logs myself. His name was purged, scrubbed from every entry system like he never existed. I tried calling the extension I'd been given before the mission. Disconnected. I checked the digital manifest of those who'd flown back with us. My name wasn't there. That was the moment I started to feel it creeping in. The erasure. First, it was small things. My Department of Defense access code was flagged for reauthorization. Routine, they said. Then I tried logging into my service record and the portal timed out. I requested a backup. It came back blank. No service history, no deployments, no security clearance. Just a placeholder file that listed me as civilian consultant, inactive. My bank account locked me out 2 days later. I called the VA office that processed my benefits. The clerk on the line paused after asking for my SSN, then said she couldn't find any record of me. "Are you sure you served?" she asked. Yes, I was sure, but that didn't matter now. I drove to my storage unit the next day, the one I'd used for years. My name was gone from the registry. They had no idea who I was. My signature on the lease was replaced with someone else's, a man I'd never heard of. I asked to see the footage of the day I signed it. The hard drive was corrupted. It wasn't just identity theft. This was institutional ghosting. They weren't stealing my identity. They were erasing it. Every night that week, I dreamed. Not nightmares, not at first, just images. At first they were the shapes, the same spinning geometries I'd seen in the neurological observation wing, but they didn't stay static. They grew more complex, moved in ways that made no sense unless you were dreaming. Rooms that opened into skies, symbols that bloomed like flowers made of glass and light. And through it all, the feeling of being watched, not threatened, just studied, like a new cell under an ancient microscope. On the fourth night, I woke up to find a note slid under my door. No envelope, just a folded photograph. It was the cube, not from a surveillance feed, not a scientific snapshot. It was a photo from inside the chamber, taken from my angle, from where I stood the first time I saw it move. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, "It seems you, Tim." That was the moment I realized the dreams weren't dreams. They were transmissions, and I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was a receiver. I tried contacting the only other person I trusted, someone from my old unit who'd handled security for NORAD installations. He agreed to meet. We sat in a booth at a diner on the edge of Maryland, away from cell towers and smart devices. I showed him the photo. He went pale. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "I don't know." He slid it back, eyes never leaving it. "You need to disappear," he said. I thought I already had. He nodded. "Not the way you think. I mean, for real. Go dark. No phones, no digital signature. They're not done with you." He looked around, leaned in. Not they. It. Whatever was inside that cube. It knew the moment you stood in that room. You carried a piece of it out. You don't belong to them anymore. I drove south that night, changed cars, bought burner phones and paid cash for motel rooms. I stopped calling old friends, stopped logging into anything. I watched the news, waiting to see if something would break. An anonymous leak, a video, a whistleblower. Nothing came, just silence. And that was worse, because silence meant it hadn't finished yet. And deep down I knew that what happened in that base wasn't the beginning of something. It was the continuation, and I was part of it now, whether I wanted to be or not. Chapter 7, The Broadcast That Never Aired. It was about a month after the return from the base when I heard about the taping. Quiet, off schedule, late at night. No press release, no official announcement. Not even a hint in the White House press pool. But I had a contact inside the communications wing, someone I'd worked with on a few classified media setups during foreign visits. He reached out in a panic, not through phone or email, but in person. He waited in my car in a parking garage in Arlington. They'd tried to record something, he said. A statement, late night, 2 cameras, isolated system, no feed, no uplink. A statement about what? I asked, though I already knew. He just stared at me. You know, I did. According to him, Trump had ordered a private taping session with 1 camera operator, 1 sound tech, both cleared beyond standard White House protocols. They were told not to ask questions, told to run the equipment and leave everything else alone. The room had been swept beforehand, the gear triple-checked. Even the hard drives had been secured in shielded casings to prevent interference. It was like they expected something to go wrong. And something did. I tracked down the tech a few days later. She was young, maybe early 30s, but looked 10 years older than when I'd seen her last. We met at a bus stop in Georgetown, just long enough for her to slip me a USB drive and say one thing under her breath. It wasn't corrupted in transfer, she said. It was corrupted at the source. That didn't make sense. That's not how video works. Digital files don't degrade in the act of creation. They either capture or they don't. There's no middle ground. But when I played the footage that night on a clean, isolated system far away from anything networked, she was right. The file opened, frame count intact, audio bar present. The moment I pressed play, the screen turned to static. Not digital static, analog. The kind with horizontal tearing and soft vertical roll like an old broadcast antenna struggling to lock on a signal. For a few seconds, I could see him, sitting there under studio lights, expression flat, hands folded in front of him. He looked exhausted. But then the image warped. His face doubled, like two versions of him were being layered together, a fraction of a second apart. The background darkened. The lights flared and died. The audio hissed. Then nothing. Black screen. Zero playback time. Like the file had eaten itself alive after the first few frames. I tried enhancing it, ran the footage through several different programs, denoising filters, waveform analyzers, even some speech recovery tools I'd kept from my old service days. Nothing worked. But when I isolated the left channel of the audio, split it from the rest, I heard something. Not speech, not at first. A hum. Very faint, but familiar. That same pressure-heavy resonance I remembered from the cube chamber. I looped the clip a dozen times. It didn't change, but on the 13th playback, there was something else. Whispers. Not a glitch, not background static. Actual words, soft, interleaved with Trump's voice matching his rhythm but not his tone. They didn't line up with what I could see of his mouth. It wasn't him speaking. The voice said, "The door opened, now it remembers." And it repeated, again and again, sometimes overlapping, sometimes breaking into separate phrases. The door opened. It remembers. We remember. After a few more loops, the file crashed my system. But I didn't try opening it again. A few days later, the original hard drive vanished from internal storage. No trace, no log of who accessed it, no camera footage of the room. When I asked about it, quietly, through the right channels, I was told the footage had been deemed non-viable, not in a security sense, but in a technical one, like the file had been rendered too toxic to touch. That's when I started hearing about Trump's behavior. Not publicly. He still smiled in photos, still held rallies, still pointed at the cameras and gave the same lines with the same familiar cadence. But in private, he'd changed. Staff said he'd begun refusing morning briefings, canceled meetings without warning, would stare at his own hands like they were someone else's. One aide swore she heard him talking to the mirror in his office. Not at it, to it. Another reported him mumbling phrases that didn't make sense. The second moon, the reverse night. Baby, watch from beneath. When asked what he meant, he would wave them off or ignore them entirely. Sometimes he would just smile, that tight, paper-thin smile, and say, "You'll see it soon enough." He stopped speaking about the cube altogether. No one asked him to. One by one, those of us who'd gone with him began to vanish from the roster. Not all at once, not violently, just reassigned, or retired, or in my case, erased. We became shadows in our own files. The photos disappeared, the clearance was revoked. The official reason for our presence at Groom Lake, routine site inspection? There was no inspection. There was a doorway, and something on the other side had seen us. I don't know if it came through or if it had always been here, but whatever it was, it had used him to make contact, and when it spoke through him, the world shivered. I can feel it now, like a hand pressed lightly on the back of my neck, not pushing, not pulling, just reminding me it's there, that it remembers me too. Sometimes I wonder if the file still exists, if someone kept a copy in some bunker far from where men make decisions, if one day someone will play it again and hear the whisper for themselves. But most nights I don't wonder. Most nights I dream. And in the dreams, I'm not watching the cube, it's watching me. Chapter 8. The sky looks different now. I'm not sure where to begin anymore. Some days I wake up thinking I've imagined it all. The cube, the base, the symbols, Trump staring through me like something else was wearing his face from the inside. On better days, I pretend I was just another agent on a black mission gone sideways, another casualty of secrecy and sensory fatigue. But most nights, when it's quiet and the wind shifts just right through the tree line behind this cabin, I know better. I remember it all, and I know it hasn't ended. It's only changed shape. I've been off-grid for over a year now. No cell service, no real name. I live outside coordinates, somewhere between the place where satellites lose signal and where the world forgets to look. I paid cash for this place. Remote, tucked into the spine of a dying mountain range with too many trees and not enough interest. I don't get visitors. I don't want them. I keep everything analog. Typewriter, firewood, transistor radio. If I speak to anyone at all, it's my own reflection, and I don't always trust him. I know writing this will cost me. Maybe not right away, but eventually. Someone will find me. Someone will read this, and someone else will make a decision. But I'm tired of silence, tired of carrying it alone. There's a weight to certain memories, and if you hold them long enough, they change you. The cube didn't just respond to Trump. It responded to all of us. It marked us, tuned us to its frequency like forks struck against the spine of the sky. And something out there heard it. It started subtle. A few months after we returned, I noticed a series of satellite logs posted quietly to a Russian engineering forum, meant for amateurs, hobbyists, scanning orbital telemetry. One user flagged a repeating anomaly over southern Nevada, slight magnetic fluctuations in the upper atmosphere, registering in short bursts precisely every 6 hours and 13 minutes. The pattern was so clean it couldn't be natural. Not interference, not equipment error. Something was pulsing from below, like a heartbeat too deep to hear but too rhythmic to ignore. Around the same time, a group of amateur astronomers in Chile uploaded a compressed zip file filled with screenshots from low-band radio frequency logs. Their system wasn't even designed for deep space monitoring. It was meant to track wildlife migration tags, but it had picked up 3 pulses in a single night, not from the moon, not from deep space, from within Earth's own atmosphere. That's what got me. The direction of the signal. Every instinct told me to look outward, upward, past the stratosphere, into the vacuum where alien things belong in our stories. But this wasn't coming from out there. This was something inside our own sky, something buried deep enough to be hidden, but close enough to speak. And it was speaking again. The pattern repeated once a week for 5 weeks, then stopped. Nothing for a month. Then one more burst, stronger. A different interval, a new code. I don't know what it means. No one does. Or no one's willing to admit they do. And that's not all. Weather's changed. Not dramatically, not hurricanes or firestorms or anything the news can package for evening consumption. Just subtly. Enough for the pattern-minded to notice. I've seen it in the clouds, spiral arms forming where they shouldn't, shadows bending against the wind, tidal shifts not matching lunar schedules, a kind of geometric resonance threading through the atmosphere itself, like nature's been gently retuned by an outside force that doesn't care if we understand it. Even here in this nowhere place, the sky feels wrong. Last night I stepped out of the cabin and stood on the porch with my coffee. The stars were bright, cold and sharp like needles in black velvet, but they blinked, not like they always do, with twinkle and shimmer and distortion from the air. No, these blinked in rhythm, a pattern, 3 slow blinks, then 2 fast, then a pause. I timed it. 4 minutes and 26 seconds later, it happened again, same sequence, same pause. I stood there for an hour, watching it repeat. And I knew in my bones what it was. Not a signal, a memory, something remembering itself through us. I've begun dreaming again, not like before. These aren't symbols or echoes of the cube. These are places, rooms that don't end, corridors made of black stone and lightless windows. And eyes, always eyes, not human, not cruel, just present, watching me walk through borrowed spaces, watching us. In one dream, I stood on a plane of glass, looking up at a second moon. It was inverted, craters bulging outward, ridges where there should have been valleys. It didn't orbit, it hovered, and from behind it something moved, slow, massive, breathing thought instead of air. I've stopped questioning if the dreams are real, because I know they're not mine. A few weeks ago, someone sent me a letter. No postmark, no return address, just a plain envelope left outside the cabin door sometime in the night. Inside there was a single image, a new photo of the cube, but this time it was fractured. A small crack across the front panel, almost invisible but unmistakable under the right light. Something had shifted. On the back of the photo were 4 words. "He still remembers you." I burned the photo, but not fast enough. I still see it when I close my eyes, and now the sky's different. I don't mean the way it looks, I mean the way it feels, like it's deeper now, like the darkness goes further than it used to. Some nights, the stars feel closer, hanging too low, too dense. Other nights, they vanish altogether. Not from clouds, from something else. Something standing between us and them. I think the cube was never a prison. It was a door, and we opened it. Or maybe worse, we were supposed to. Maybe it was built for this, for him, for a moment when the right words would be said in the right shape by the right voice. Maybe Trump wasn't chosen. Maybe he fit. Maybe that's why the photo in the archive showed his face in 1952. Maybe time bends differently when you're standing on the edge of something ancient, and maybe that thing stepped through. I don't know if he remembers any of it. I don't know if he ever really understood what passed through him, but I know this. They remember him, and now they remember us. So I'm writing this for whoever finds it, for whoever feels the hum in their chest and thinks it's just anxiety, for the ones who wake up with unfamiliar symbols drawn on their skin, for the ones who stare at the night sky and notice it blinking back in code. You're not broken. You've just been seen, and once they see you, they don't forget. The door opened. The memory is awake now, and the sky will never look the same again.